Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special hybrid town hall on the Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiatives Act. I'm your moderator this evening, Dwight Strawn, host of Morning Blend, weekdays on Guardian Radio. This evening, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the Carbon Credit Trading Bill, NOW Act, which was actually just this morning tabled in the House of Assembly by Prime Minister Philip Davis. So we're getting closer to carbon credit and carbon trading becoming a reality in the Bahamas. Prime Minister Davis, in his recent address to CARICOM, talked about the shared challenges facing small island developing states like the Bahamas, including the economic constraints and vulnerabilities inherent to island nations, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, including new variants, depleted healthcare systems, long-term health impacts, and the need to strengthen prevention, surveillance, and treatment. A global inflation crisis as well, which leaves many of our people struggling to afford food, energy, and housing costs, social security systems which are stretched to the max as we seek to provide safety nets, the existential threat posed by climate change, and as a result, it will take bold and significant steps over the rest of this decade to address the climate crisis and to ensure the long-term sustainability of our nation. As such, the Bahamas has charted a progressive course forward in protecting the environment, reducing carbon pollution, and increasing climate finance into our country with the introduction of the Climate Change and Carbon Markets Initiatives Act. So you'll be hearing a lot about carbon credits this evening, but what exactly is this? How will the country benefit from this, and will this really have any impact at all on global climate change? Hopefully by the end of the night, we'll all have a better understanding of this, and maybe even some firm answers. Now, guiding us through it all, to provide those answers, are a panel of experts who've been working tirelessly behind the scenes and in the forefront of environmental protection issues in the Bahamas. Joining me, we have Rochelle W. Newbold, Special Advisor on Climate Change and Environmental Matters in the Office of the Prime Minister. Mrs. Newbold has been working in the environmental field for more than 21 years. She's worked in both public and private sectors of the Bahamas and the United States, managing environmental matters. She's also managed United Nations regionally funded projects and was the first chair of the Bahamas Global Environmental Facility Small Grant Program. Mrs. Newbold recently served as the first appointed director of the Department of Environmental Planning and Protection, which is the first legislative environmental department in the Bahamas. She holds a Master's of Environmental Management degree from Duke University in Coastal Environmental Management and a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington in Marine Biology. She recently led the technical team at COP25 and COP26 and has been appointed to the Office of the Prime Minister as the first chair, the climate change czar, actually, for the Bahamas, and special advisor on climate change and environmental matters to the Prime Minister. Mrs. Newbold also contributed to the development of the first Blue Carbon Credit Initiative with the drafting of the Climate Change and Carbon Markets Initiative Bill. Let's welcome Rochelle Newbold. Also this evening, we have Charles Hamilton, Climate Change Advisor in the Office of the Prime Minister. Mr. Hamilton has worked at the nexus of climate change, global health, youth and sustainable development issues through various roles held in government, the private sector, civil society, and multilateral organizations in the Bahamas, Canada, and Europe. Mr. Hamilton has supported the Bahamas in regional and international climate change negotiations and was most recently elected as a group of Latin America and Caribbean countries representative to the UNFCCC Article 6.4 supervisory body, the new UN carbon credit system. He's delivered interventions at the 75th United Nations General Assembly. Additionally, he has served as project manager for the development of several key climate change and health-related reports for the country. And now let's welcome Charles Hamilton. Plus, we want to say a big welcome to our audience here for the Town Hall. Good to have you all with us. And there will be opportunities for you to ask questions tonight. And for you watching us at home, we want this to be an interactive experience. So we're on Facebook at Climate Change and Environmental Advisory Unit, the Bahamas. On Instagram at CCEAU Bahamas, on Twitter at CCEAU_Bahamas, and on YouTube on CCEAU-The Bahamas. And the easy way to remember that is C2O. C2O, and you can figure out what that is. So we definitely want as many people as possible to participate tonight. We're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, we'll have presentations from Charles Hamilton and Rochelle Newbold, and they will get to your questions. You're watching the Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiatives Act Special Town Hall live.
Be ready to look, listen, and link. After crisis or disaster, look, listen, and link. Because we are stronger together. It's okay to talk about how you feel inside. Shows the strength you have in you to make it all alright. Look out for the children, women and elderly, so all of them know, you know just how they feel. Be ready to look, listen, and link. After crisis or disaster, look, listen, and link. Because we are stronger together.
You think about others, but don't forget about you. Listen to your brother, and he will listen to you. You're never alone. Don't accept no violence. Reach out to your neighbor. Don't suffer in silence.
Be ready to look, listen, and link. After crisis or disaster, look, listen, and link. Because we are stronger together.
This message is brought to you by the Pan American Health Organization and the Caribbean Development.
And we are back live at the Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiatives Act Town Hall, and we're going to get to our presentations with Rochelle Newbold. First up, we have Charles Hamilton.
All right. So, good night, Bahamas. Our country and our planet is facing a climate change problem. I think that this wasn't any more personal to us than the experiences that we saw from Hurricane Dorian impacting our country in 2019. And at the United Nations level, the UN Secretary General, he talked about this triple punch that the climate emergency provides. We know that firstly, climate change impacts countries with the lowest greenhouse gas or carbon emissions, and the Bahamas is a very good example of that. Secondly, climate change impacts the poorest and most vulnerable persons in those countries. And the same has happened to communities like that in the Bahamas. Additionally, storms continue to trap countries in a cycle of death and disaster. And the financial cost from Hurricane Dorian, which we know were in the billions of dollars, is not something that the Bahamas can expect to foot alone. And so, what were we doing as a country? What are we doing as a world? Well, countries came together to try and chart out a path forward on how will we address the climate crisis. And you may have heard about the Paris Climate Agreement. This was an agreement signed in 2015 to determine how countries would move forward in addressing the climate crisis. This was based on 3 pillars: ensuring that we can limit global average temperature increases to less than 2 degrees Celsius, and for us as small island states, to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius by the year 2050, while also improving our resilience and our ability to adapt to climate change, and ensuring that we can be able to withstand the current impacts that are happening right now in our countries, and to be able to ensure that financial flows are actually occurring so that these particular initiatives can actually be conducted on the ground and across the world. And so the Paris Agreement, it's a long document. It has 29 articles or sections. And the main thing that you need to know is that every single country, including the Bahamas, made a pledge to try and make nationally determined contributions or a national climate action plan. And this really sets out targets, measures, and policies on how we'll be able to address the climate crisis in our country. And 5 years later, countries are now in the process of updating these national action plans, known as NDCs. This is going to be very important when we are talking about this issue of carbon credits. And so one of the articles of the Paris Agreement, also known as Article 6, it addresses this whole issue where some countries are choosing to engage in voluntary cooperation or partnerships to try and address the implementation of their national climate action plans, or their NDCs. This is to ensure that we can both increase ambition so that we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions or carbon dioxide emissions, and also to help us to better adapt to climate change and to better adapt quickly to what we know are the ongoing and future impacts of the climate crisis. And that was in 2015. We charged all countries around the world, how will we do this through this carbon credit mechanism? And so fast forward to last year at COP25, or the Conference of the Parties, the UN's biggest climate change conference. Decisions were finally made on how we will address issues related to carbon credits. And there are three main areas. You might hear about something called Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement. And this is bilateral transactions between countries. Then there's Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement. And this is dealing with the new UN carbon credit system. And then finally, countries wanted to be able to find a way to engage in partnerships to be able to address reducing emissions and also helping to improve adaptation actions. And that's under Article 6.8 of the Paris Agreement. So to make it really simpler for the Bahamian public, when you hear us talking about carbon credits in the UN Article 6 space, carbon credits are known as emission reductions if you're talking about Article 6.2, or they may be referred to as ITMOs. Actually, yes, they'll be known as ITMOs in Article 6.2 and as emission reductions in Article 6.4. And when we're talking about Article 6.8, there is no actual transaction of funding, but trying to form those partnerships so that we can actually help to improve and address the issues related to climate change. So what exactly is a carbon credit? And I think that we need to relate this in a way that people can understand. I'm sure that each and every single one of us, we look at the gas tracker and we see a price applied to that, right? But how does that price actually get made? Well, it's a balance between supply and demand. Supply is low for crude oil around the world, while demand for crude oil is high. The balance between supply and demand, right, is how you end up getting a price for gasoline. So we know that there are many issues impacting supply of crude oil. The war in Ukraine, there were oil rigs that were shut down during the pandemic. There are employees that are not able to be mobilized to get oil out of the ground. There are supply chain issues. Versus demand, we know that we all are ready for this pandemic to be over. We're all going, people are going back to work. They're traveling, they're moving about. And that's increasing demand on oil. And that's why the price of oil is so high. The same thing is happening within our ecosystem. There are sources or areas where carbon emissions are in high supply. So from greenhouse gases, fossil fuels that we burn, and also with tearing down land, versus there are sinks. Our atmosphere is one of them. Our land is one of them. Our sea is one of them. And there's a balance between that. And for us, the most scarcest or most limited resource that we have in the world is the remaining carbon dioxide that can be put out in the atmosphere before we see irreversible impacts to people within our islands and around the world. And you can actually see that on the screen, where we talked about these different temperature scenarios. What do we need to do? How much more carbon can be put out in the air before we hit this 1.5 increase in temperature? That's 420 gigatons. Versus hitting to 2 degrees Celsius. That's 1,270 gigatons. But why am I talking about temperature? What does this have to do with carbon credits? Well, we said that as a global community, we need to keep global temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius, and most definitely for us as small island states, below 1.5 degrees. And why is that? I think that persons have seen this photo. The photo of our country right now in the present day sea level. And we're currently on track for 1.1 degrees in global warming, doing nothing right now. If we have 1.5 degrees, you see that we lose more land, we lose more infrastructure. And if we go to 2 degrees, we lose even more of that land, jobs, economies. And we're currently on a pathway, if we do nothing in this world, to a 3-degree global warming pathway. This is not something that we can have happening within our country. And so, to make it clear, a carbon credit is the price that we apply to 1 ton of carbon dioxide emission reductions, recognizing that there's a limited amount that we can afford to put out in the atmosphere before it impacts our country negatively. That's what a carbon credit is. And when you hear it in this whole Article 6 language, a carbon credit can be called an internationally transferred mitigation outcome, or in Article 6.4, a emission reduction credit. And so you're going to hear this language a lot. And for us in our country, we needed to be able to understand what were the international frameworks in place around the trade of carbon credits and help that to frame the Climate Change and Carbon Markets Initiative Act. And so diving into Article 6.2, we talked about this interactions or transfers between sovereign states, sovereign to sovereign countries. You have to ensure that when we're trading these credits, that they're real, that they're verified, that we actually know that they exist, and that they're helping to ensure additional impact is happening with reducing carbon dioxide emissions. Additionally, as it's called an ITMO, or an internationally transferred mitigation outcome, it must be traded internationally, all right? And we have to measure it in metric tons of CO2. When we're talking about carbon credits under Article 6.4, the UN said, you know what we've been doing for a long time is not working. We need to create a new system that will be able to replace the Kyoto Protocol, which was only really working for developed countries, and ensure that every single country around the world is able to participate in this mechanism to be able to trade carbon credits. And so this needs to be used to help with achieving our national climate change plans, or NDCs, and with helping us to achieve the long-term goals of the Paris Agreement. But what is this thing about carbon credits? For us, I think people, they hear about this thing of carbon offsetting, where they think, okay, we need carbon credits because this particular group is polluting, and we have the carbon credits, therefore we'll sell it. But that's simply shifting pollution. And the UN system said, this can't work because it's not actually solving a problem. What Article 6 tries to put in place are safeguards so that we can actually manage to achieve those outcomes or those goals of the Paris Agreement. Thank you. So what does this mean? With Article 6.2 and 6.4, automatically any person who is buying a carbon credit has to pay a 5% levy to help to fund adaptation initiatives within developing countries. So for us in the Bahamas, that might mean building seawalls, helping to build more resilient healthcare infrastructure that has been destroyed after hurricanes, helping us to be able to create a grid that could be able to withstand the challenges of increasing temperatures, helping us to be able to supply more water, or help to improve our agriculture, to be able to get us to have more food, noting that climate change is impacting our water availability. Additionally, a portion of those credits, both in 6.2 and 6.4, have to be canceled. So in other words, you may want 100 carbon credits, but you're going to only get 98 if you purchase it from us, because we want to be able to track that we're not just shifting pollution, we're actually achieving emission reductions. We're trying to put aside some emission reductions that will not be traded to any other country or be used for our own national climate action plans, because we know that what was being done in the past of just shifting pollution is greenwashing. And furthermore, you as an organization or a country cannot just use carbon credits to close the gap in the pollution that you're doing. You need to do more. And so this is why this has been put in place. Additionally, there is this key issue about corresponding adjustments or avoiding double counting. We can't be selling carbon credits to country A and counting it within our own climate national action plans. No. Otherwise, we're not actually achieving emissions reductions. And so there are key rules in place to ensure that if you trade to country A, you need to take that out of your national carbon credit budget to be tracked, and then country B can then apply that for use towards their national climate action initiatives. But the difference between 6.2 and 6.4 is the fact that 6.2, countries can voluntarily do that, versus 6.4, or the new UN climate credit system, they have to do it. But for us as a country, we're going to be pushing that every single country around the world, if they engage in 6.2 transactions, follow these same guidelines, and that they do more than what's actually stated. Because we know the time is limited for us to be able to get the finances that we need to address climate change and to help to reduce global temperatures. So let's also talk about Article 6.8, right? Some countries, some organizations, they have no interest in carbon credits. They don't want to buy them. They don't want to sell them. But they realize that it is vital. They have technology. They have technical skills that they can provide that can help us to improve our adaptation, resilience. They can help to improve sustainability within countries. They can help with ensuring that we reduce greenhouse gases and carbon pollution, and that we help to develop clean energy sources. And so this is how come 6.8 was done in. There's no quid pro quo. There's no trading of money to get carbon credits. But they know that that the time is limited. And so whatever mechanisms that can be done to ensure that finances or opportunities are traded for countries to be able to reduce and adapt to climate change has to be done. So what are the implications for the Bahamas? The Article 6 rules, they're not fully in place. We were recently engaged in negotiations in Germany to try and just work out the finer details. We have the rule book, the Paris rule book that was approved last year in Scotland. And we've come to an agreement on this is what needs to be done for A, B, and C, but the mechanics of it needs to be fully flushed out. But countries like the Bahamas need to ensure that we have reporting for Article 6 and UN carbon credit trading needs to be in place. We already have that through some capacity building initiatives that are being done in country. Parties also need to be able to report or provide a national inventory report or greenhouse gas inventory report. And our country is also doing that. And it's only working to try and improve how we report on our carbon emissions. We also need to be able to update, ensure that we're updating our National Climate Action Plans, or our NDC, and we're currently doing that. We also have to ensure that there are a legislative framework in place to ensure that we can be able to follow the rules of the Paris Agreement. So ensuring that there are mechanisms in place for authorizing the use of a carbon credit, and that there are arrangements in place for tracking a carbon credit, and that we're looking at building a registry to be able to house the information and ensure that there's proper accounting for the carbon credits, and ensuring that our greenhouse gas inventory is improving with every single cycle to ensure that we're not messing around with numbers. So additionally, we have to ensure that whatever we do with our carbon credits, that it ensures that our implementation of our national action plans, or our NDCs, has to happen. You cannot trade carbon credits with sectors that are related to your national climate action plan. Otherwise, you're defeating the purpose. And that's what we're also doing. There's also a great opportunity for us to get increased access for adaptation if countries around the world are all participating in this carbon credit trading space. This is what we need when we know that the global community has been lacking in the amount of adaptation finance. And additionally, there's exciting opportunities for partnerships to advance these non-market approaches to be able to ensure that we need and we get the support to be able to improve and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that we help to improve our infrastructure, that we help to improve food security, that we help to get clean energy. And there are partners that are ready and waiting to be able to do this. And so I want you to know, Bahamas, that in advancing the Climate Change and Carbon Markets Initiative Act, this team, the government, has moved forward really, really exercising and ensuring that we're in alignment with global best practices, that we're going to be at the forefront, and we're going to be negotiating to ensure that these rules are maintained and they are strengthened, and that at the end of the day, the people of the Bahamas and the people of our world are the beneficiaries of this great opportunity for us to leverage climate finance, and to address the climate crisis. So thank you, and we look forward to telling you more and sharing more about carbon credits.
All right. Charles Hamilton, let's give him a round of applause. All right, remember, we want to hear from you, so join us on social media on Facebook, Climate Change and Environmental Advisory Unit, The Bahamas, on Instagram, CCEAU Bahamas, on Twitter at CCEAU_Bahamas, and on YouTube, CCEAU The Bahamas, and the easy way to remember those, C2O, C2EAU. All right, we're going to take another break. When we come back, Rochelle Newbold. Stay tuned. You are watching live the Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiative's Town Hall meeting right here.
Keisha, what you saying, girl?
Man, Tony, you scared me.
Oh, they scared.
How this pandemic treating you? You working yet?
After all this time with no vaccine, no job, I had to do something.
Oh, so that's why you finally get your vaccine.
Man, I had to do what I had to do. Now I telling everyone get your vaccine. So you been good?
Yeah, man. I get my vaccine. I working, doing my little nail thing on the side. You know.
Solid. So when we getting out though?
Sweet boy, you couldn't handle us then, and you can't handle us now.
Wow, that's how you can do me, Keisha?
All right, Mr. Big Boss Tony. Stay safe.
You too, Keisha.
Vaccinate today, live tomorrow. A message by PAHO WHO, Canada, and USAID.
Climate change poses a direct and indirect threat to human health. Over time, the changes in temperature, sea level rise, rainfall patterns, air quality, and intensity of storms have serious impacts on current and future generations. Our access to adequate food and fresh water, and our risks of contracting vector-borne diseases like dengue fever, food and waterborne diseases due to contamination, chronic illnesses like asthma, or mental health conditions are all connected to changing climate. We must act now across sectors, systems, and stakeholders to prepare for, prevent, respond to, and recover from the health-related impacts of climate change.
This message is brought to you by the PAHO WHO Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and the Healthy Bahamas Coalition.
Welcome back to the Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiatives Act Town Hall Live. Now we're going to turn things over to Rochelle Newbold.
Thank you, Mrs. Strawn. So we've heard from the moderator when he made his introduction about the plight that the Caribbean and the Bahamas faces as it relates to climate change. And we've heard from Mr. Hamilton with regards to what's going on with the UN system and the processing and the procedures that are being in place to address a particular item as it relates to climate finance. He talked about the Paris Agreement and particularly Articles 6.4, 6.2, and 6.8 in that agreement. And the fact that we as a country have determined that we will no longer sit on the sidelines and just be victimized by something that is beyond our control, as we do not contribute significantly to the issues of greenhouse gases, which results in the impacts that we suffer wholly as it relates to climate change. So the government of the Bahamas, in a most progressive and forward-thinking, came about with the Climate Change and Carbon Markets Initiative Act, taking the opportunity that is presented through the Paris Agreement as it relates to Article 6.2, 6.4, and 6.8. When we look at this act, we can see that first and foremost, in Part 1 of the act, it clearly states that all internal, territorial, and exclusive economic zones, all seabed and subsoils underneath the waters, the continental coast and marine ecosystems, and the forest, and such carbon credits are deemed for the purpose of this act to be the property of the Bahamas and by right the sovereign wealth of the people of the Bahamas. So first and foremost, the Act frames this market initiative in the context that it is the people that are involved in the transactions related to carbon credits within country. The objective of the Act clearly states that it is to enable the government to create incentives and implement initiatives to support the overall global target for greenhouse gas emissions reductions consistent with its nationally determined contributions. And as Mr. Hamilton would have said, that document speaks to what it is that we as a country have determined that we will contribute in trying to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that are being excluded throughout the world. It secondly identifies that to ensure compliance by the Bahamas of its obligations under the Paris Agreement, and it will take into account the common but differentiated responsibilities, the respective capabilities and flexibility provisions acknowledged under the UNFCCC for small island developing states to address climate change. And this is a particularly important clause because, as I said, the Bahamas does not contribute significantly to the issue of climate change, but we are still required in the global space to show our part and be proactive in what we are doing so that we're not contributing to it. And finally, the objective of this bill, the one that we tend to focus more on when we talk about the bill, is that it is to enable the establishment of a market in the Bahamas to trade in carbon credits. So when we look at the 8 sections of the Act, the first one speaks to the administration of the Act, and it indicates that there is a shared ministerial responsibility with respect to the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, and the Minister with responsibility for the environment and natural resources. This is important because the Prime Minister, is responsible for the financial acumen of the country, and the Minister of Environment is responsible for the biological resources within the country. The appointment of a management company and the functions of which will be those functions specified in Clause 7 clearly indicate that if we are to engage in this market, we must have identified individuals who are capable, who are knowledgeable, and who have the expertise to be able to maneuver in that market space. The Bahamas is not a trial and error attempt. We will have but one shot at getting this right. And it is our intent to make sure that all our I's are dotted, all our T's are crossed, and all our ducks are standing in a row. Another part of the administration of the Act speaks to the appointment and function of an advisory council, which shall have responsibility for serving as a technical advisory body to the management company. This advisory council will be appointed by the Prime Minister and will comprise Bahamians who have expertise in the areas that are identified, such as law, such as finance, such as knowing fully well the ecological and environmental aspects of our country. We will be given directive and input to that management company as it relates to the administration of the carbon credits market and the financial undertakings that they will do on our behalf. Part 3 of the Act speaks to the fundamental principles governing the trade in the carbon market space. As Mr. Hamilton would have said, there's a lot that's still under negotiation, but the Paris Agreement provides a framework under which all parties who are to engage in this market should adhere to. One is the concept of additionality, which requires that all transactions in the carbon trading space are carried out under this Act must result in the additional effect of a reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions. This is a particularly important clause because it seeks to eliminate the issue of greenwashing. There must be an additional benefit that is being brought by the assets as it relates to a carbon trading event. Secondly, the measurability of the mitigation outcomes, which are to be reported under the requirements of this Act, are to be accounted for in tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, meaning that all measurements, we're not talking about apples and oranges here, everything must be apples and apples. One consistent measurement value that will be easily tracked throughout every transaction. It also requires that the permanence of the emissions reduction can be verified, meaning that It isn't that we're offering a product that's here today and gone tomorrow. That product must be consistent. There is a target in terms of an agenda timeline for all countries with regards to a net zero approach. And we must be able to identify what that schedule is and what that timeline is, which would then require that whatever these assets are that we are offering must be protected, because we cannot say, well, today we're offering 20 tons, but tomorrow we decide that we're going to build a hotel on the area that for which those carbon credits were contributing to. And also, the careful recording of all reductions. Bahamas, this is not an event whereby we can't remember who we sell it to. That was something that was done last time by those folks. No, the reporting mechanisms is going to be very much transparent, because not only will it be required to be done nationally, but we will also have to report internationally on all the transactions, all the offerings that we engage in. And also, this is also going to help us to prohibit against the issue of double counting. Mr. Hamilton also spoke to this. We cannot then say, we're selling you something, and because carbon credits isn't something that's tangible, people can't hold or possess it. It is something that's scientifically verifiable, but it's not tangible. And therefore, the issue of reporting and the monitoring on it is going to be essentially crucial for us. Gone are the days where we make an assumption, where we make a guesstimation. These things will require scientific accuracy. Therefore, the world will be looking at us to ensure that we are handling this market space properly. Also, the requirement for verification and validation of projects by a reliable, independent auditor prior to the trade of the carbon offsets. This is an important thing, because a lot of conversation in countries is, well, how much is it? And how much we can get? Like it says, the requirements for a verification and validation of the projects by a reliable and independent auditor prior to the trade of the carbon offset is critically important. We will not be able to go to market unless we have a gold stamp of approval that what we're offering is actually real, tangible, and it will contribute in the manner in which we say. And until that process is done, there is nothing we can say about that. As it relates to point number 7, the requirement that the project should aim to aid in the environment rather than cause harm means that there must be a benefit that's to the natural resources, not only nationally, but internationally. It cannot be anything that would create more problems as it relates to greenhouse gases. And also the compliance with the best international practices with regards to the share of proceeds and the cancellation rates. Mr. Hamilton also spoke to this when he talks about the fact that anytime we engage in the market, there is a percentage that will go into the International Adaptation Fund. This is a fund that we as a country and other Caribbean states already make application to help our governments gain additional resources to deal with climate-related matters. And this would be something where you would see, we would go, people talk about getting fundings from the GCF or the GEF or even other government agencies throughout the country. These additional funds, any sales will also be feeding into that so that we will also have this reoccurring access and benefit sharing as it relates to financial support. Part 4 of the bill talks about the obligations of the Bahamas under the Paris Agreement, and it sets out the obligations of the Bahamas under Articles 4, 7, 9, 10, and 11 of the Paris Agreement. When you look through the bill, you will also see that the bill itself contains the full Paris Agreement. So it makes it easier for those who are working their way through it to look at what the bill is talking about and what the Paris Agreement actually requires. And it talks about the issue of the communication and the maintenance of successive determinate contributions. What that means is every time we report as a country on our contributions as it relates to greenhouse gas emissions and what we are doing to lessen our greenhouse gas emissions. And by way, what are we doing to lessen our greenhouse gas emissions? In this country, there are 2 major contributors to that. That would be our power generating facility, BPL, and the car that each of us drive or the buses that we all ride every day. They are the two largest emitters that we have in country. And we see that there is a mass effort to address number one, our power generating authority. So we are looking to diversify using renewables because we also have to show a progressive movement towards a net zero country. Even though we're not a major contributor, we still share a global responsibility to do things that would be beneficial to the planet as a whole. And secondly, the implementation of domestic mitigation measures, which yet again would speak to other legislations that we would need to put in place to help to reduce our GHG emissions. And the development of an adaptation plan. And that adaptation plan speaks to what are we doing to address our part in the global mitigation efforts as it relates to greenhouse gas emissions and our adaptation to the climate issue. So when we talk about things like ensuring that we are not clearing the forest and ensuring that we are enforcing that that is happening, those are very important things that we would need as a country to ensure that these things are happening. When we look at Part 5 of the Act and we talk about the creation and implementation of initiatives to reduce emission, the Act provides for the creation and the implementation of initiatives to reduce emissions through Clause 19, which empowers the Prime Minister to create and implement initiatives and incentives to comply with the Paris Agreement. This here creates opportunities and it generates an environment for innovative means not only internationally but nationally. And also Clause 20 of the Act provides for the fundamental principles governing trade in the carbon markets. I want to stick a pin here to talk about the fact that today and for the next 2 days, we are engaged in a youth climate conference. And throughout that conference, we are inspiring the youth of the Bahamas to be innovative, to be forward thinkers, to demand their right to be a part of this initiative. And clauses like this and initiatives that are required through this are things that the Prime Minister is already doing. We're already planning and building for the future in regards to moving forward under these two clauses. Secondly, in clause number 6, options for the participation in the carbon markets in the Bahamas. The Act provides for various options for participation in the carbon markets. There are 3 ways in which we can engage in the markets. 1, as a result of bilateral or multilateral trading agreements, meaning the Bahamas government can engage with another government or a series of other governments with regards to carbon trading. 2, as a result of trading with a private entity, meaning the Bahamas government can engage in a transaction with Amazon or Netflix or the cruise ships. It's a private entity, we have a right to engage with them. And 3, in a voluntary carbon market space. In the voluntary carbon market space, which is the space that will be regulated through the UNFCCC, through the International United Nations procedures and policies. Part number 7 establishes the National Emissions Registry. As Mr. Hamilton would have said in his introduction, we would need to now start to record and document with scientific accuracy. No more guesswork. We need to know and understand exactly what we're emitting, how much we are emitting, how much we're reducing that emission by taking affirmative actions to deal with those 2 major emitters that we say, that I talked about earlier, and the establishment of the National Emission Registry and the appointment of a registrar. So this bill calls for a particular individual to have that responsibility of ensuring that those recording and that documentation of those emissions are fully addressed. And also the registrar shall have the functions that are set out in clause number 28 of the bill, which are an extensive set of clauses, and you can look at those things, but it generally speaks to the fact that he or she would have the responsibility of documenting what our emissions are, verifying that those numbers are correct, and not only having an internal server of information of the data, but also we would have to report those internationally to the secretariat that is in charge of climate change and climate reporting matters. Part number 8, the final part of the bill, generally called miscellaneous, is the part that speaks to the confidentiality of persons carrying out functions under the Act or on behalf of the government. And this is not unusual in issues of business transaction. Clause number 30 also provides for the extensive regulation making powers of the Prime Minister, because as Mr. Hamilton also alluded to, the fact that these things, as it relates to Article 6, 4, and 8, 6, 2, and 8, we are still in negotiations in a global sense. So that we know that there may be an emerging changes, there may be new restrictions that are put in place, and we need to ensure that we have the flexibility to provide for those changes by virtue of regulations that would need to be put in place. So I felt that after having much conversation, there were two questions that people asked about. What about greenwashing, and when can I expect my money? Number one, we talked about the issue of greenwashing and the fact that the Bahamas will not sell credits to individuals who are not doing their part to implement an agenda towards net zero. And when it comes to your money, clause number 8 of the Act speaks to the fact that there will be 2 financial vehicles that would be created. 1, a sovereign wealth fund, and 2, a what is it? Let me make sure I say the right words. A special purpose entity that will be created that says that if we want to deal with social matters, the money will go in there, and that the money that comes out of there will deal with social matters. If you want to do environment, it'll go in there for environment, it'll deal with environment. But notwithstanding all of that, I want to tell you that the Bahamas is looking to enter the voluntary carbon market, and it's also looking to establish a carbon credit exchange, which will be open globally to SIDS and LDC countries. Thank you.
Rochelle Newbold, let's give her a round of applause. All right, so I know people have questions. I see people taking notes, and I'm sure you do at home as well. So when we get back, we're going to be getting to those questions. You are watching the special hybrid town hall on the Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiative Act. We're going to be back after these messages. Stay with us.
Hello? Keisha, you something else, boy.
Who this is? Tamika?
You don't even remember my name? Wow, Dread.
Girl, I've been so busy. You still planning your trip?
Girl, and I can't wait. I right here online booking my car.
You dare planning trip? You vaccinated?
Girl, we had to. We ain't been nowhere since this pandemic started. Girl, and we got a 14-day vacation.
Best vacation ever.
Girl, are you though?
Well, I know you was gonna get the vaccine because you too like travel. When y'all get your vaccine?
Girl, long time. Because you gotta get your first dose, wait, then get your second dose at least 2 weeks before you travel. Johnny get his vaccine and he 12. Even Grammy get hers. Child, and Grammy say she ain't get no money. But I see her hiding that under the mattress.
Child, let me send my list, because I know you going shopping.
Keisha, don't play with me.
Vaccinate today, live tomorrow. A message by PAHO WHO, Canada, and USAID.
In some of our older buildings here in Nassau, we're seeing where the acid quantity in the rain is beginning to break down some of the limestone structures, some of the older buildings. And when hurricanes come through, we're seeing the fresh water dilute some of the salt in the ocean, causing our bays to not be as healthy, allowing our estuaries to not be as productive. So the fishermen are seeing the impact even in the amount of fish that they are collecting and catching.
This message is brought to you by the PAHO WHO, Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and the Healthy Bahamas Coalition.
Welcome back to the special hybrid town hall on the Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiatives Act. Once again, I'm your moderator, Dwight Strawn. We are with Rochelle Newbold and Charles Hamilton, and it's time for questions. And we've got our audience here, and we've got your questions from home on our social media. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes.
Good evening. My name is Marcia Musgrove. Thank you for the presentation on the bill now act and what our country is planning to do with respect to getting additional financing in to help with our climate change adaptation issues. So I have two questions this evening. The first is, you mentioned, Mr. Hamilton, about sources and sinks related to carbon credits. Could you please explain a little bit more? What do we mean when we say sources and sinks? And the second question relates to the carbon credit exchange. Could you share a little bit more about that? What is it and how will that work?
Okay. Thank you. Am I on? Yeah, I'm good? Okay. So yeah, in terms of talking about this issue of sources and sinks. So there are sources of where carbon dioxide can come from. When we put fuel in our cars, and we turn on our engines, carbon dioxide is going out in the air. When we go ahead and we clear down a tree, or we decide that we want to go ahead and dig up and do something else in the ground, you're releasing carbon dioxide, right? So those are some ways in which there are sources of carbon dioxide. Then there are sinks. They are essentially objects or entities that can absorb carbon dioxide. We know for a fact, because the planet is warming, that our atmosphere is one of the biggest sinks for carbon dioxide. We also have our land, so our trees, the soil, wetlands, etc. They all trap carbon dioxide. And then we have our oceans, right? The ocean itself, seagrass, and all the other flora that exist within the ocean, and even the fauna, the animals as well, that are capturing carbon dioxide can act as a sink. When talking about a carbon exchange, I think that, or a carbon credit exchange, in the same way how you can think about a stock exchange, you can say the same thing about a carbon credit exchange, right? So essentially, you have a marketplace in which persons, individuals, companies, countries can be able to buy or trade a carbon credit. And there are various carbon credit exchanges that exist around the world, but whether or not they benefit our country or are able to benefit our region is a whole other bit. And knowing that we want to be progressive in moving forward in this issue of carbon credits, we need to ensure that the people of the Bahamas and the people within our region, that we're in a better position to be able to fight against this issue of climate change. Carbon credits have been trading for a long time. They've largely been traded within the developed countries, and they've put in tons of infrastructure to try and control carbon credit trade. And what we're saying is that we need to change the narrative. We need to flip the script. We're doing so much in our country to try and put ourselves as a leader in so many other areas. And this we see as a way to be able to diversify our economy, to be able to create new jobs, to be able to create some new future jobs, green jobs. So for those who have an interest in finance, or those who have an interest in blockchain, or those who have an interest, you are a numbers person, you are able to engage with persons, you're a salesperson, all of these things come into place with putting together an exchange. And so all we're simply saying is that as a country, what we think is the most progressive thing to do is to set up an exchange here. We've been at the forefront for a long time in the financial services sector. Why cannot we be at the forefront of a carbon credit exchange system? So that's my answer.
Marcia, that's good. Yeah? All right. The next question is going to come from social media. The question is, the Act references a national adaptation plan and adaptation goals. Should these not be established and in place before this bill is passed? It seems that the cart is being put before the horse. Who wants to take that one? Charles?
Yeah, okay, sure. So how we see this, yes, there should be, yes, the Act does call for putting together national adaptation plans and other initiatives. However, we can do all of these at the same time. Putting forward this Act does not preclude us from doing it. If anything, it actually codifies that we need to do this. We know that when we signed up to the Paris Agreement, that we agreed to do this internationally. But now we're actually putting it into our law that we need to establish a national climate and national adaptation plan, that we need to put on these initiatives to be able to chart out a pathway, because these plans are not just for showing what we're going to do, but what we also need, right? And some countries are doing such a great job at showing what is it that they need and the pathway forward to improving adaptation in agriculture, in health, in water security, et cetera. And so, if anything, I think that this actually puts a bit more, for a lack of better words, some more fuel in the tank for us to try and accelerate moving on these particular components that we know that we needed to do. But now we just need to get on it, right? It's before us, and I think that this is good for us as a country.
Yeah. Okay. Our next question comes from Kelly. Kelly.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good evening, Bahamas, and thank you, Mr. Hamilton and Mrs. Noble, for your presentations. With each assessment report coming from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, we realize that climate change and its impacts are becoming worse than we thought the last time. We understand here in the Bahamas that climate change impacts are already happening and that there are more changes and more impacts in the pipeline. Some of these impacts include degradation and loss of the very ecosystems that we are hoping to sequester said carbon. How do we know that these carbon markets will be a viable option for the Bahamas?
Well, I could take some. So, like Mr. Hamilton said, the carbon markets are, was, and continue to be in play. What we're talking about, just as he just said, we got to flip the script. The developed countries have been in control of that market, and they've been using that market to address their particular needs. What we are saying, that former market does not feed into the adaptation needs or the adaptation fund that countries like ours need in order to deal with the issues of the impacts. We know that we consistently have pledges towards a net zero goal and pledges towards providing the financial resources that are needed, but it's really like pulling teeth from chicken, and chicken don't have no teeth. So we cannot no longer sit on the sidelines and just be holding out our hands for somebody to come along and save us from something that they're creating, right? And I don't want to make it sound like our developed partners are indifferent to what we're doing. But the reality is also for them that they have a populace, they have a political platform, they're trying to stay within their little bubble while we are outside trying to deal with the rising water that's occurring within our own bubble. So we now have to be more progressive in how we deal with this. I don't think the Bahamas truly captures the fact that what was said by Mr. Strawn earlier, that Mr. Hamilton just was appointed as a representative from the group of Latin American and Caribbean countries to negotiate on the global stage for this entire region as it relates to this carbon credit and this carbon credits market. So the Bahamas is leading this charge. We are taking control of this narrative, and we are taking the control of the narrative with the concerns, the desires, and what we envision as a people is necessary for us to maintain our livelihoods, our economic stability, and our health and education for our youth that is coming into being. And I think that is fundamentally awesome that we are now in this space and we are now seeking to control this space. And like I said at the end, we are seeking to bring the rest of our island state partners in, as well as our least developed country partners in, because to stronger, we are the majority. And it's mind-blowing that the majority of the planet is the one that's facing the most impacts from a smaller group that's causing the problem. So we have to do what is right, and we have to stand up as a country. And this carbon credits market, if we don't put a value on things, globally, we then don't have no respect for that resource. So now that we can put a value on something, that seems to resonate, and lights go off in the heads of everybody globally. Because when you tell me that thing costs $5 or $20, I know what that means for my pocket, and I make that decision. So now we're saying this thing that's under threat is very valuable. And you need to make sure that what you're doing isn't impacting it, but we can help you, but it's going to cost you.
Kelly, that's good. Yep. All right, let's go to Ashley. Anthony, okay. Let's have your question.
Anthony Cartwright, and thank you for the presentation. I thought it was quite informative. I have 3 very short, very direct questions. And I think it relates more so to the revenue we anticipate generating from the carbon credits. I think I read something along the lines of $375 million per year. If I'm not mistaken, I think in 2021, the market was, I think, maybe $1 billion. So that suggests about 37.5% of the market. Are we confident that we're going to achieve that as new market entrants? That's the first question. The second question is on the exchange. Is it going to be a sort of commission-free exchange? And if not, does the country, the Bahamas, do we do a sort of profit-sharing mechanism, with the exchange that would probably be doing the bulk of the work? So just as far as how the Bahamas benefits from trade activity. And then number 3, what was number 3? Number 3, the National Emitter, I think, Registry. Was that it? Are we exploring new kinds of technology just to, I guess, keep a record of those things, make sure that it's transparent? For example, I think you alluded to blockchain. Is that something that we're considering? So those are those 3 short, very sweet questions.
Hold on to the mic. We might need you to repeat them. But, okay, you got the first one? Yeah?
You talked about confidence in achieving the funding that's being speculated about. You would see, the revenue. So in the act, it talks about the validation and verification. Until we do that, all we're doing is speculating. I could say we got hundreds of millions that's out there. But I need somebody, that independent body that we've all agreed in the global space, those bodies, those agencies, until they come in and do the proper auditing and accounting, that is only then will we know what the value is or what the revenue benefit is. And we wish not to speculate, because when we come before the Bahamian people and we say it's X dollars, we're going to tell you why it's X dollars, and you will be able to track that X dollars. So we're not interested in assumptions and guesstimations. We're going to give you the actual data so you have a clear and definitive understanding as to what we're talking about when we're talking about this resource. And then you asked about the benefits from the exchange, right? So with respect to how the exchange is its functionality, there is definitely, when we talk about the setup of this act, the primary beneficiaries are the Bahamian people. We're not going to be engaging in any level of partnership or any sort of commerce where we are not the major beneficiary, because we're talking about a resource that the part 1 of the act clearly says already belong to you. So there is no way you can negotiate from a point of weakness with something you already own. So we will definitely, whomever we are engaging with, we are going to ensure that the Bahamian people come out on top, and that revenue is, like I said, is very transparent, it's very trackable. We won't be worrying, but is it the VAT money? No, we're going to know for sure. We're going to be able to figure it out, and we're going to be able to track it. And then you talked about the National Emissions Registry and the use of new technology to ensure the data reporting is captured. Most definitely. Gone are the days where you had a hard server in the back room with the air conditioner running, and the hurricane came and the roof gone through, and then the server dead. No, we're going to be talking, everybody got the cloud. Everything is going to be technologically advanced because, as I said, the world is going to be looking at us. Our I's are going to be dotted, our T's are going to be crossed, and our ducks are going to be all in a row. We cannot afford to mess this up in our first offering.
Wow. Okay. Let's take a break. We are live here speaking with Rochelle Newbold and Charles Hamilton, and this is the Town Hall on the Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiatives Act. We'll be back. Stay with us.
You okay? You need a minute? Cool. Okay. Listen up, people. I know a thing or two about extinction. And let me tell you, and you'd kind of think this would be obvious, going extinct is a bad thing. And driving yourselves extinct? In 70 million years, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. At least we had an asteroid. What's your excuse? You're headed for a climate disaster, and yet every year governments spend hundreds of billions of public funds on fossil fuel subsidies. Imagine if we had spent hundreds of billions per year subsidizing giant meteors. That's what you're doing right now. Think of all the other things you could do with that money. Around the world, people are living in poverty. Don't you think helping them would make more sense than, I don't know, paying for the demise of your entire species? Let me be real for a second. You've got a huge opportunity right now. As you rebuild your economies and bounce back from this pandemic, this is humanity's big chance. So here's my wild idea. Don't choose extinction. Save your species before it's too late. It's time for you humans to stop making excuses and start making changes. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Town Hall on the Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiatives Act. Once again, I'm Dwight Strawn. We are talking with Rochelle Newbold and Charles Hamilton. We've got a studio audience, and they have questions, and you at home have questions as well, like this one on social media. What steps are being taken in terms of legislation, regulations, funding, staffing, and technology to protect the carbon sinks of the Bahamas, namely forests, mangroves, coral reefs, and seagrass beds? If these are not fully protected and properly funded for their sustained management before the carbon market is established, we risk losing everything the market is supposedly based on.
Okay.
Charles, I think
yeah,
you
sure.
want to take this one?
This is a very good question. First things first, establishing the legislative framework to address this issue is the first step. And I know that it can seem like a sprint in trying to address these issues. Our mangroves, seabeds, all these things are not going to just disappear overnight. The markets are also not going to disappear overnight. And so for us, we're trying to take a stepwise approach to ensuring that we can address these issues. The first thing that I said is that I really encourage people to go online and read the Act because with us codifying certain provisions, the National Adaptation Plan, certain mitigation actions as well, that is telling us that how do you ensure that you are going to be able to protect the very resources that you want to be able to put out or utilize for the marketplace. We're also exploring any and all opportunities to protect these resources, risk facilities, et cetera, right? And working with partners to see that what needs to be done to ensure that these things can be protected. We've seen and we've engaged with partners who have shown us in the global south, in the developed world, technology that they've put in place and the type of training programs that they've put in place to also protect their natural resources. So I just want everybody to say, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We are going to be laying out things in a stepwise approach. We recognize that there is regulation that needs to be put in place. We recognize that there will be certain staffing complement that have to be put in place. And all of this is going to happen in time because if we're putting ourselves as a leader in this space, then there are certain things that need to be done at the end of the day. And so I just want to encourage that person online, we are moving forward with all of these. You might not see them all happening publicly, but they're happening, right? And we will definitely look forward to more opportunities to share and celebrate as we reach for these various milestones.
Okay, all right. Our next question comes from Stacy. Stacy, good evening.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good. Stacy Mutri. I share the concerns of the person online. I think history has shown that we're challenged with walking and chewing gum. We tend to walk for 10 miles and the gum's left on a shelf somewhere and never actually goes along for the ride. And so it would be great to know, if not tonight, very soon, what the timelines are for protecting our mangroves and seagrass beds, which are really important carbon sinks, because we need to do that. We seem to be very efficient at creating financing and economic engines or mechanisms, but not so much at protecting the very basis for those things, which is the environment.
So I would agree with Ms. Mutri. Having worked in the environment field for 21 years, it took us 20 years to come up with a Department of Environmental Planning and Protection and legislation to support it. And that is a very egregious thing for a country such as ours, which utilized the environment as a tool for economic development through tourism. But I believe also that, yes, we have seen the past, and like they said, once we acknowledge it, we can then better plan for the future. We cannot just ignore it and say it's all going to be a bed of roses. I think that the Carbon Markets Initiative will allow for there to be funding to address things. But our problem has fundamentally always been compliance by our people and enforcement. These have been the drawbacks. The coppice, the forest is protected. There is legislation on the books that says thou shalt not cut down the forest without a permit. But yet people are out there doing what they do. The mangroves are protected because they are part of the forest legislation. So it isn't about a whole platter of laws that we need to put in place. It's about the enforcement that needs to occur. It's about the education of our legal and our justice system such that when people are brought finally before the courts that action is taken. And it's also about making some amendments and revisions to some of those laws to increase the penalties when people seek to breach those laws. But as Mr. Hamilton said too, the issue of staffing, okay, we talk about a very bloated public service that maybe there's a lot of people but no efficiency. Well, when we have these type of climate finance mechanisms that can bring injection into the various sectors of the government, it will allow us to bring in new blood, new ideas, bring in the manpower and the resources that are needed to engage in the enforcement and monitoring that is going to require. We will see a shift, but we as a people must do this together. We should not have to spend a significant amount of money to get people to do what is right. That money could be better diverted to issues of education or health or anything else rather than us having to put somebody out there to watch the tree so nobody cut it down. But I do agree, we have to look back at our past to see how we could better plan for the future.
Okay, all right. Let's take a question from Fallon.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the presentations. My question is kind of related to Mr. Cartwright's question in terms of the potential, the true potential for monetizing our carbon stocks or creating these credits, particularly when you think about this concept of additionality. And I guess this question is more geared towards you, Charles, Mr. Hamilton. Do you see this as a limiting or an issue for the Bahamas, considering that we really have not experienced, and we're blessed in that way, and we've done a good job of not having the same levels of kind of deforestation or destruction of intact forests, intact ecosystems as, say, other countries, but which puts us as at a disadvantage where we're starting with a baseline that, except for areas impacted by Hurricane Dorian, we have relatively intact systems that how are you going to get that additionality? Where are you going to improve the sequestration potential of a relatively healthy system? So not just from the economic point of view, but the natural systems and their existing conditions, do you consider that to be a limiting factor? And will that reduce the amount that we're able to monetize per se? And is there something that I'm missing in, say, Article 6 or somewhere else within these frameworks that allows us to benefit from healthy, intact systems and preserving the existing stocks or their existent performance per se?
Okay, I will try to answer this question. I think that one thing that the Bahamian people, what we can be proud of, is the fact that despite, the current news stories, we have done a good job in protecting a large large proportions of our ecosystem, right? And we shouldn't be punished for doing that, right? The additionality rule, whether it's looking at increasing or expanding those existing reserves, or looking at protecting those existing reserves, because there are areas that are not protected too, right? Are one way to go about doing that. There is this concept around emission avoidance as well, right? That's also being talked about in Article 6. I just sat down in a room where this was being debated, and there's still difficulty around this, right? But I think that this is how come we need to talk about flipping the switch, right? It is not our fault that we have been good stewards of our planet and our ecosystem. And we're trying to find a way to be able to benefit from these assets that we've protected so well. And then you say, no, you can't do that. And I believe that, the government and the vision that we have for being able to advance and monetize our carbon stocks is looking from that particular perspective, right? We're looking at both addressing this issue of additionality that is clearly indicated within the Paris Agreement, and particularly the recent outcomes from Glasgow. But there are also other components in there and new methodologies that also have to be looked at when you're looking at emission avoidance, right? And so couldn't seem like the game's rigged, right? Because you've been doing a good job and everybody else has not been doing a good job, and so now you're trying to get the finance. Yeah, it can feel unfair. But one thing I will say is that what people are saying is that the Bahamas has been very loud and clear on the international stage. And we've been making it very clear about what our needs are. And people and countries are seeing that. It is shocking some countries. And I will tell you, without getting into many details, there are some big countries that have been very surprised at our modus operandi, how we've been operating. Because we realize that we don't have much time, and we don't have time to play nice. We have to be able to protect our people. So I don't know if that's the clearest answer, but we're going to be working to ensure that protecting our environment remains at the forefront, and also looking at other opportunities to ensure that us continuing to expand and protect and keep a clean ecosystem is also something that can be rewarded.
Okay. All right. The next question comes from social media. This question is, what is the real tangible benefit of these carbon credits to the average Bahamian? Reductions in taxes, increases in social benefits, what are they? I'm sure a lot of people are wondering that as well.
Well, in the bill, we talk about any profits coming out of the carbon credits market. There are two financial vehicles, that of the Sovereign Wealth Fund and that of the special purpose vehicles, right? What you did not hear was the consolidated fund. So one of the things that this Sovereign Wealth Fund, and I think we can say that there is some legislation that will come out that will clearly define, as I said from the very beginning, this process will be very transparent. There will be clarity along each step of the way when we talk about the money. right? Because that money is going to be tracked not only nationally, but internationally as well. So the benefits that will be occurred will be national benefits. Do not go to your mailbox and look for a check, because there will be none.
Oh boy.
Right? It will be broad in terms of, like I said, in the special purpose vehicles, if we have an educational crisis, we can direct funding directly to that, and that funding will be traced, it has to be audited, it has to be clearly accounted for. If we have a crisis that we're saying, I mean, as we started this, we talked about healthcare, we talked about education, we talked about our social safety nets all being in dire need of financial injection. And we will have to ensure that these special purpose vehicles speak to those particular things, but we also, foremost, as required by the Paris Agreement, pump funding back into the environmental assets, the natural assets, and what's going on with them, therefore ensuring that they are properly protected, monitored, and any enforcement regarding breaches are clearly addressed. So, like I said, please don't go to your mailbox, because there will not be a check in the mailbox. But we will all, as a country, benefit by lifting the country and its people in its entirety up from the level in which we are now.
Okay, all right. We are running low on time. Let's, Bradley. Bradley has a question.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bradley Watson, and I just want to ask more about biodiversity. So when I think about conserving lands and conserving our carbon stocks, I also think about the habitats we're going to be conserving in that process, right? And so I don't think that much of the conversation talks about how much more conservation value we're going to derive from this effort, and also how do we go about securing payments or acknowledgement and value for our biodiversity across the Bahamas in these new areas we're going to bring into conservation and in the ones already in conservation? Is there a way to bring that to the forefront of people's minds to think about it in this fashion, that we're finding ways to subsidize conservation in the Bahamas across the board?
Well, like I said, a requirement of the Paris Agreement is that when you engage in the carbon markets, there must be a benefit back to the natural resource. So automatically, we will be required to pump money back into the protection, conservation aspects, joint management schemes that we want to implement with our local communities, because everything can't be a no-touch, no-take. There has to be this, and we can't all be managing from a top-down approach. There has to be an integration of all peoples into this resource space, and the funding will be there to allow such things. But as we talk about the funding and we talk about the injection, we come back to the point of the first question that was asked by the gentleman over here. Well, how much is it? We have to do the validations. Once we have the validations, we will then have something tangible that we can truly speak to, and then we will be better able to plan with vision and understanding and knowledge.
Okay, all right. Let's take our final break, and then when we come back, we're going to be getting final thoughts from Rochelle Newbold and Charles Hamilton. This is the Town Hall on Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiatives Act. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Give me 2 of these, please. Wado, you want any?
Yeah, man. Boy, what that is?
Oh, that's rambutan. It hairy ate.
Miss, what you doing? Move that from me.
You scared of fruit, Wado?
No, boy. Needles. That thing look like a bunch of them.
So I guess you ain't gonna be taking the vaccine then.
And leave hole in my arm? You ain't serious.
Wado, stop. That's why you ain't taking the vaccine? You won't gonna feel nothing.
I ain't scared. I just don't like needles.
Wado, it takes seconds. Then you got better protection against a deadly virus. Ooh, cassava. So what if I go with you to get the vaccine?
Go with you? I ain't sure.
Don't worry. I ain't gonna tell Lisa I had to hold your hand.
I ain't on your run. Pay the people.
What? Wado. Well, if I paying for this, we going to the clinic now.
Vaccinate today, live tomorrow. A message by the WHO, Canada, and USAID.
And we're back here. The final few minutes of the Town Hall, CCEAU. That's much shorter than the long title we've been saying all night. All right, so it's time for final thoughts. Rochelle Newbold and Charles Hamilton. Who wants to go first?
Yeah.
Charles?
Sure. So I guess what we want to say is that the Bahamas, our people, we're living in some exciting times, right? Even though the climate crisis is indeed real, it's impacting us now, and it can seem frightening. I feel excited to see that we're being forward-thinking, that we are trying to stay ahead of the game, and that we're flipping the switch on how we're gonna tackle this issue that we see is having real and tangible impacts on our country. So I think that one of the key things that you can do as a person who's watching this town hall is to go ahead and go and read up on the Act. It's on the Office of the Prime Minister's website. You can also go and follow our unit's social media handles, which have been set all night. And feel free to ask questions. If you're a student and you're thinking about moving into a space, think about whatever area you're going in, what is a climate change touch point for it? Whether it's in engineering, whether it's in finance, whether it's in IT, think about it, because this is the way that we need to be thinking about. And I believe that this act and the various initiatives that will come out of it will create a space for you to be able to operate and for us to continue to be a leader in the region. So if you need more, feel free to contact us. And I'm excited for seeing how things will advance in the next few months and years.
Charles Hamilton, thank you very much. Rochelle Newbold, you have the final words.
Well, the wealth of the nation, we always say, is its youth. And the empowerment of the youth is very important to us. Yes, we can have the act. Yes, we can have the bill. Yes, we can have a whole lot of resources and finances that are available. But if we don't train and we don't engage our youth to be and to have a global understanding as to what is going on and have that awareness, then it's all going to be for naught. Because we've seen how the rich become poor because of poor judgment and a lack of understanding. And because we are in the midst of this crisis, there is no turning back. We are at a point where being a refugee may be our only option if this whole thing gets turned sideways. So for us, it is fundamental that the youth have an understanding of what is going on. We've lost 2 years with COVID. We cannot afford to lose any other time. An environment is being created that is allowing for opportunities for entrepreneurship, that's allowing for opportunities for empowerment for our youth, and we need to take advantage of this. I'm excited to be a part of it. I think it's a great day of dawning for us as a country. We've gone through Dorian, and now we awaken to a new and bright sunny day. People, let's run out there. Let's get warmed by the sun. Let's do what we need to survive and expand and thrive as a country.
Okay, Rochelle Newbold, Charles Hamilton, thank you both so much. Let's give them a round of applause, folks. Thank you. And thank you to the studio audience. Thank you so much for being here and those great questions. And to everybody at home and those who sent in questions, we appreciate you. It's been a great event. Thank you for having me to be a part of it, allowing me to be a part of it. And look forward to having more of these discussions on this very important issue. It's been the Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiatives Act Town Hall. I'm Dwight Strawn. Thank you again. Have a good night, everybody.
Be ready to look, listen and link. After crisis or disaster, look, listen and link. Because we are stronger together. It's okay to talk about how you feel inside. Shows the strength you have in you to make it all alright. Look out for the children, women and elderly, so all of them know, you know just how they feel. Be ready to look, listen and link. After crisis or disaster, look, listen and link. Because we are stronger together.
You think about others, but don't forget about you. Listen to your brother, and he will listen to you. You're never alone. Don't accept no violence. Reach out to your neighbor. Don't suffer in silence.
Be ready to look, listen and link. After crisis or disaster, look, listen and link. Because we are stronger together.
This message is brought to you by the Pan American Health Organization and the Caribbean Development Bank.
Keisha, what you saying, girl?
Man, Tony, you scared me.
Oh, they scared.
How does pandemic treating you? You working yet?
After all this time with no vaccine, no job, I had to do something.
Oh, so that's why you finally get your vaccine.
Man, I had to do what I had to do. Now I telling everyone get your vaccine. So you been good?
Yeah, man. I get my vaccine. I working, doing my little nail thing on the side. You know.
Solid. So when we getting out though?
Sweet boy, you couldn't handle us then, and you can't handle us now.
Wow. That's how you can do me, Keisha?
All right, Mr. Big Boss Tony. Stay safe.
You too, Keisha.
Vaccinate today, live tomorrow. A message by PAHO WHO, Canada, and USAID.
Climate change poses a direct and indirect threat to human health. Over time, the changes in temperature, sea level rise, rainfall patterns, air quality, and intensity of storms have serious impacts on current and future generations. Our access to adequate food and fresh water, and our risks of contracting vector-borne diseases like dengue fever, food and waterborne diseases due to contamination, chronic illnesses like asthma, or mental health conditions are all connected to changing climate. We must act now across sectors, systems, and stakeholders to prepare for, prevent, respond to, and recover from the health-related impacts of climate change.
This message is brought to you by the PAHO WHO, Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and the Healthy Bahamas Coalition.
Hello? Keisha, you something else, boy.
Who this is? Tamika?
You don't even remember my name? Wow,
Girl, I've been so busy. You still planning your trip?
Girl, and I can't wait. I right here online booking my car.
You dare planning trip? You vaccinated?
Girl, we had to. We ain't been nowhere since this pandemic started. Girl, let me get a 14-day vacation.
Best vacation ever.
Girl, are you though?
Well, I know you was gonna get the vaccine because you too like travel. When y'all get your vaccine?
Girl, long time. Because you gotta get your first dose, wait, then get your second dose at least 2 weeks before you travel. Johnny get his vaccine and he 12. Even Grammy get hers. Child, and Grammy say she ain't get no money. But I see her hiding that under the mattress.
Child, let me send my list because I know you going shopping.
Keisha, don't play with me.
Vaccinate today, live tomorrow. A message by PAHO WHO, Canada, and USAID.